So we're just going to get started explaining for the folks who got kits or got supplies on their own how to start the lei, and there's a point at which it becomes kind of a repetitive process, and at that moment we'll start with some slides to share about some of the cultural and historical context of lei in general and the kind of lei that we're making today. So yeah, again, if you got one of the kits mailed to you from the Haffenreffer Museum of Anthropology, you should have 3 skeins of eyelash yarn. I took the paper off of 2 of mine to just get started early, but 1 should be orange and 2 should be red. And we're gonna start just by kind of unraveling a little bit to get the 3 strands organized. It might be good to kind of have a space for you to put down the ball once you get the strands kind of untangled. There's 2 ends, and we want to find the end that's on the outside of the skein, because if you wrap from the inside and it gets knotted, it's really hard to kind of dig in this and find the knot. So it's kind of this long process of like you pull out a bit and you pull and pull until one of the ends comes out. Sometimes you're lucky and it comes right out, and sometimes it's a longer process. So here, I think I'm seeing the end of mine. Is that it? Here we go. So then just try to, it might be a little bit in a clump when you first pull it out. Just try to shake it out with pulling gently so you don't tighten any knots that it might already be in. And again, feel free to send questions. I think you should have the ability to direct message the hosts. So we have our skeins kind of on the floor next to us, but separated from each other so that they don't tangle, the 3 strands don't tangle with one another as we do this. So just to give everybody some time to get those out and lay them. No questions so far? All right, so the other supplies that you should have with you are a boba straw. The reason it's boba specifically is so that they're kind of a little bit thicker than like a regular plastic straw, and your kind of base, which is this grosgrain ribbon. So once you have your 3 strands untangled, first thing you're gonna do is string the ribbon through the boba straw like this. Not necessarily all the way through, just until you have a little bit sticking out like this. Then you'll fold it over and tape it down. Cut off a piece of tape for me. You don't want too much because this part is we're just gonna end up cutting this off after anyway, but make sure it's secure so that when we pull on this end, the straw doesn't like let go of this end of the ribbon.
Okay, got some scissors.
So yeah, we're going to place it over the ribbon and around the straw. But it's nice and secure, like this. I imagine since my yarn was already untangled, some people are just catching up. So if you need us to slow down, definitely send us a message. But for people who are already here, the next step is to tie the ends of the 3 skeins of yarn together. So just kind of grab them together like this and just tie them in a regular knot. You don't need to have that much sticking out at the end, because this is something else we'll just cut. So this is just so that they're together. Any questions?
See, some people still need a little time to untangle their things. And just a reminder, if you came in or started a little late. So essentially all we did was we took the ribbon and threaded it through the boba straw. We took a little bit of tape and we taped it down so that one end of the ribbon is secure to one end of the boba straw. Yeah, and then we have our 3 strands of eyelash yarn untangled, but they're now kind of, yep, clumped together to make one strand. Sounds good. No rush, pretty chill process. And after this is the hardest part. Like,
yeah,
by far the hardest. Untangling the thread is the hardest part. But yeah, if you have any more questions, you can DM them and I will try my best to answer them right away.
It's taking long to untangle. Yeah, that's again, that's the hardest part of this whole thing. Try your best not to cut it, even if it means like putting it out on the floor and untangling the whole thing,
yeah.
Because we'll probably use the whole thing of all 3 skeins. Yeah. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Skeins.
I think it is.
Yeah. But basically these fluffy balls, they're very soft and fun to touch.
Did you tie the yarn together or tape it?
These are just tied together in a regular knot.
Yeah, just one knot to knot the 3.
So someone just joined us. Do you want to do the quick rundown?
Yeah, sure. We'll do the quick rundown one more time as some people are still catching up. So essentially we have our boba straw and our ribbon. We threaded the ribbon through the boba straw, tied it to one, or not tied it, but attached it, secured it to one end with a piece of tape so that it's secure on that end. And then on the other side, we have untangled our 3 skeins of eyelash yarn, and we have without cutting or without disrupting the yarn itself. And yep, and so we have them tied, all 3 tied together at the end with a knot.
Awesome. So we can re-explain it too as we go on, because after we get to kind of getting the twirling started, we will just be in a repetitive process from there, and yeah, can answer the questions again. Yeah. But for people who are at this stage, the next thing we're going to do is to take our 3 strands that are attached together and tie them in a knot at the end of the ribbon where it meets the straw. So yeah, just like this. Sorry, no, it's a little hard to see with my hands in the way. So you want the knot to be pretty firm, but not so tight that it doesn't move. The reason for this is that the way this lei goes is that we're going to wrap these 3 around the boba straw again and again and push it down. So this knot needs to be tight enough that they don't just come off the ribbon, but still loose enough so that you can push it down this way.
All right, so once again, we are tying our 3 strands of eyelash yarn to the bottom of the straw on the long side of the ribbon. The knot should be tight enough that it is secure, but loose enough that you can move it back and forth through the ribbon, because we're gonna be twisting our yarn and continuously pushing it down so that it'll start to form your lei. It's a pretty cool process, but yep.
If you are feeling like it might come off, you can definitely also double knot it. Just make sure that that doesn't make it, again, so tight that it won't slide up and down the ribbon. Sometimes that's good to do because the eyelash yarn, like the texture of it is kind of silky and slippery, just as long as you're getting all 3 strands in there. Okay, where does it look like people are at?
Yeah, if people want to, I'm going through your little faces. If people want to give a thumbs up when they're ready to go, or if you have any distress signals. All right, cool. Seeing a lot of thumbs up. That's great. And of course,
Awesome.
when we're in the twirling process, feel free to ask questions as we go back, because the twirling process is going to take a little while, but it's kind of nice and therapeutic. And during that time, we'll be doing a short presentation on some of the more historical information. Okay, now to the fun part.
So yeah, someone has raised their hand.
All right, I just finished like untangling. So how do you tie like the 3? You put them in a knot and then you tie them together to the end of this?
Exactly, yeah. You can tie them in a knot first when you like pull them together into one strand kind of.
Mm-hmm.
So tie a knot there, and then once they're all together, you tie them to the end of the ribbon that's sticking out of the straw. Tight enough that it doesn't feel like it'll slip off if you pull on it a little, but loose enough that it'll still slide up and down the ribbon this way. Awesome.
Cool. Does anyone else have any questions before we move forward? All right.
Great. So now you can hold the base of the straw in one hand and hold your 3 strands together in another, and just twirl the strands around the straw to gauge the width between each twirl. This is about how much it should be, maybe like a finger and a half, or as big as like the width of the straw, and just keep going around until the end, like this. And then when you reach the end, you're still kind of holding it taut a little bit. Push them down and then off the straw.
But make sure you keep it at the end of the straw and not all the way down the ribbon. Make sure it's kind of holding in place at the very base of the straw, which you can kind of do with your other pen. Yeah,
you can kind of like hold the end of the ribbon and these together like with the straw for this early part, and just keep doing the same thing.
And you want to try to get it to be pretty tight, like gathered together, right? Because as like you want this to be pretty dense and compact. It'll at the end of the day make your lei look fuller and fluffier, and not too scraggly. So, and we have a lot of yarn to go through. It will amaze you, but you will definitely use the entire 3. Was it skeins? Isn't that like a lizard?
Unrelated, maybe.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so this is basically the whole thing until we have to tie it off at the end, which is just another tying some knots.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions or concerns about this part? Because this is going to be the main motion and process for the rest of your lei.
just a heads up for what happened. If you encounter some knots as your skeins are unraveling, it's okay, just do the same thing again. Try your best to kind of work out the knot by pulling it from both directions. And there might come a point where the whole thing just ends up unraveled all over your floor or your table, and that's totally normal.
Yeah, how are some people doing?
See, like here, mine got tangled a little bit. I'm just gonna like shake it out a little bit until it gets untangled. So it kind of is a good idea to keep an eye a little ways down so that you don't get to the tangle when it's already on the straw, because it's just a little bit easier to untangle when you have some room. If the knot is so bad that it's looking like you have to cut it, that's okay. We're just gonna have to tie it back together if that happens.
Is that gonna happen to us?
I don't think that's gonna happen to us
Okay.
quite yet.
Sorry, I'm looking down the line.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ashlyn, you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit confused. Do I, like I'm right here, but do I push it down onto, or like hold it, but like on the base of the straw, or do I push it all the way down to the ribbon?
Yeah, push it all the way down to the ribbon. So I'll show you where mine is right now.
Okay.
You'll feel when it like kind of pops off of the
the ribbon.
straw
Off the straw.
and onto the ribbon. And it should look, I'm trying to hold it so that they don't get too spread out from each other. But this is, yeah, it's definitely off the straw and on the ribbon.
Mhm.
And this is like a very small mini section of what the lei is gonna look like fluffy and
Yeah, we want to keep it close to the base of the straw, like I said, just so that as you're pushing it down, there's no gaps between your bunches of yarn. But yeah, so every time you do a twirly and you push it down to the base of the straw and kind of let it onto the ribbon, and then you're like reloading the straw for each round. Yeah, any other questions? Because once people are comfortable doing this step, we can start our PowerPoint. I mean, you can always ask us questions about the lei-making as we're doing our PowerPoint. But yeah, just want to make sure everyone's in a good place before we transition to that. Where do we tie the string again? Allie, you want to ask your question out loud so we know what knot you're talking about?
Yeah, I think I might have done it wrong. So when you tied the initial knot, like you know how you tied the 3 strings together,
uh-huh.
were those supposed to get tied to this boba straw or to the ribbon?
To the ribbon. At the very base of the straw though, like to the ribbon that's right coming out of the straw. And if it's at the if it's tied to the straw right now, you can push it off and tighten the knot and just try to keep going from there.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So I know it's hard to see because part of the strategy here is to keep this, keep the lei looking fluffy and not sparse. Part of what you do is like hold it in your hand as you're doing the rest for the beginning stage. So that it doesn't come loose, but I realize that makes it hard to see what I'm doing.
So we just prepared a short PowerPoint, a little bit about the history of lei-making in Hawaii, and as well as featherworking, because the lei that we're making is kind of a contemporary like replacement to what traditional lei-making with featherwork would be like. So yeah, so here's a really cool image I thought was pretty impressive. So this is our statue of Kamehameha I, and this is what it looks like on Kamehameha Day when he is adorned with all of these really beautiful, really marvelous lei. So if you think the lei you're making is a lot, check out these. All right, cool. So what is a lei? Let's do this one.
Yeah, so Rae gets all of the credit for making this beautiful PowerPoint with great vibrant pictures of like all of these, but we can just, yeah, talk casually about what lei are. So a lei is a garland or wreath that Native Hawaiian people and then others who've kind of adopted this practice from us give as symbols of affection, honor, thanks, congratulations. You probably see them in the greatest abundance during graduations, which is why this was feeling like a very appropriate time to make them since graduation is coming up.
Yeah, so lei are abundant throughout the Pacific Islands. Most Pacifica cultures have their own tradition or rendition of what a lei is like. It's believed that our tradition of lei stems from our migratory roots between Hawaii and Tahiti from the 8th to 14th centuries. And from there, we've kind of developed our own like abundant traditions of what our lei look like. Another fun fact is the word lei has also been used figuratively to mean beloved child. Our friend Lei, I know, is in attendance today, and I'm sure that's where her name comes from. And a cool thing about this is that it said that the legs of a child being carried on their parents' shoulders and their legs dangling down over the shoulders is supposed to resemble the wearing of a lei. So the word lei come to inhabit that beautiful connotation. Oh, look, who are those people? So as Makana was saying, the places that you'll see a lot of lei are graduation season. It is a huge deal back home in Hawaii. Around the month of May, everyone is trying to get their hands on enough lei. I mean, we don't even have an impressive amount at this point in our picture. That was from our high school graduation. But other places that you see lei commonly are at weddings and proms. This is very typical for men to have these type of open maile leis. Maile is a type of leaf vine. They smell really great. Yeah, so all of the guys at our prom had these long maile leis. The most beautiful pageantry of leis you'll probably see at once is during the Merry Monarch Hula Festival, which is usually held the week after Easter. This year, because of COVID-19, it is being pushed back to July. It was canceled last year, so we're really, really happy it's coming back. That's kind of like the Super Bowl of hula, Hawaiian pageantry, etc. Yeah, and then another great place that we see lei being given often is to honor a guest. So this is when Linda Tuhiwai Smith visited us last February, and this was a lei that our friend Faith, her auntie came to visit and brought this lei from Maui for us to gift to Linda Tuhiwai Smith, which was really, really nice.
Can we take a commercial break?
Oh yeah, let's take a commercial break.
Okay, commercial break from the PowerPoint to the lei-making. So sometimes this happens. Your skein is broken.
Can I see?
This is the same thing that might happen if you have a knot that's so tangled that you just have to cut. So I'm just gonna demonstrate, in case this has happened to anybody else, how you would fix this issue. So usually if you've kind of kept it taut the whole time, you can let this part go and it'll still stay where it needs to stay. And yeah, we're just gonna tie these together in a knot. It's good to do it as close to the end as you possibly can so that it doesn't kind of stick out of the rest of the lei.
Okay, so there are a bunch of different types of lei. So these are more traditional types of lei made with gathered items and foraged items that we would have had pre-contact, and we still are lucky enough to have these today. So the most common type of lei that you've probably seen is a lei made out of flowers. This one is made out of pua kenekene, but there are an innumerable amount of flowers that you can use to make lei. Some of the most beautiful and impressive types of lei that I like are ni'ihau shell leis. These tiny, tiny, tiny shells can only be found on the beaches of Ni'ihau, which is an island that like 500 people live on and you have to be invited to go to. So these are really, really rare. And if you see someone wearing these, you know that they have connections and they're really, really lucky to have one. My personal favorite type of lei is a kukui nut lei. So kukui are a type of nut that I don't know what translates to in English, but they have an oil in it that can be used for making fires and lamps. But the dried and polished nuts are these like black nuts. And then this one also has some tea leaf adornment on it, and then a lei is a tea leaf lei. When you're a kid, this is one of the first leis that you learn how to make. It's it's like a braiding and twisting process, and you tie one end to your big toe, and or if you have a friend to hold the other end, and you kind of like braid it and twist it. And then this one also has little roses on it, which if you're really advanced, you can weave into your lei. All right, and here are some contemporary types that have become popular nowadays. A money lei, if you don't get, it's kind of lei you want to get at graduation. You go to the bank and get the crispy $1 bills to make these. And then the ones we're making today, which are made out of eyelash yarn, but there are also woven yarn leis that are kind of like this one. My great grandma is in an old folks home, and whenever she wins bingo, she gets one of these woven yarn leis. And for my undergraduate graduation, she mailed me like 80 of them from all of the bingo that she won that year. So I have a bunch of these at home. And then a paper lei, I just included this one because this was like the lei that you can teach really young children how to make, toddlers. This is the one that I learned how to make when I was in preschool. And this one just uses plastic straws and paper. All right, and here are some other specialty type of leis that I find really beautiful as well. So maybe some people have seen lei po'o, which is the type of lei that you wear on your head. And so this one in the corner is I guess I dare to say typically more masculine type, but this one is made out of tea leaves and other types of leaves. The one below it is made out of lehua blossoms, and it is really nice around the bill of a hat. A lot of older people like to wear it like that. I think it's really nice. When I called my grandpa to ask him what kind of lei I should include, and what was popular when he was growing up, he was like, "Oh, you have to add a double carnation lei." I asked him why, because carnations aren't necessarily indigenous or endemic to Hawaii. And he said that they were popular because it was the lei that Elvis wore in the wedding scene in Blue Hawaii. And because of that movie, double carnation leis became kind of synonymous with like a really special, either for weddings. And I got one when I graduated. So they're really nice. All right, and a lei hulu is the type of lei that we're trying to emulate today. So hulu means feather. We're going to get to that in a little bit. And then here's another one. This is from my sister's graduation. Today is her birthday, so I thought I would honor her in this PowerPoint. So she's wearing a lei po'o made out of flowers. And then she also has a snack lei, which is becoming more popular nowadays as well. I think when I graduated, I got a cup noodle, like an instant ramen on a lei, which was kind of cool. Yeah. And then, yeah. So here are a few more. So this is a lei niho paloa. I think this is the coolest, most interesting type of lei. So this lei is made out of hundreds of thousands of strands of human hair. So if you look at this one, each of these little strands that are visible to your eye are actually hundreds of strands of hair that are then braided together. And so this would be a type of lei that was worn exclusively by the highest ranking royalty. We believe that our hair, among other parts of our bodies, are imbued with our mana, which is like a word for spiritual power and energy. And so a person that would have this many pieces of hair in their lei would be indicative of how much mana or power they had. And it's not like we were cutting people's hair to make these. These are hairs that were gathered from pillows, from other types of things. I'm not sure too much about the specifics of how long it would take to make one of these, but I'm assuming it would take a super long time. And the pendant in the middle is, so niho means tooth. And so this is actually a whale's tooth that is shaped to look like a tongue. So the purpose of that is that the tongue shape is supposed to signify that you are a person in the community that has voice, that has power, that has the ability to, speak above and for others. And whales were also not a thing that Native Hawaiians hunted or anything. So it would be very auspicious for a whale carcass to wash up on the beach in very specific places. And that was a sign that they were able to gather the whale's tooth to make these. So, yeah. Cool. Continue.
Yeah, so what do you do with the lei? sorry, I'm reading it. Ray again
sorry.
created this beautiful PowerPoint. So yeah, now it's considered appropriate to accept a lei from like a person of any stature or age, I guess, and allowing the gift. Are usually the way people give them is kind of like over the head like this, and like putting them around your neck. But historically, it was considered inappropriate to raise your hands above the head of someone who outranked you in the kind of traditional Hawaiian class system, which no longer is in effect. But it's still kind of like I don't know, a holdover that people like when someone is giving a lei, I just practically it makes sense for you to kind of go down a little bit so that they can reach. And one kind of other fact about like the act of putting a lei on people is that it's forbidden for pregnant women to wear closed lei because it symbolizes the idea that like the umbilical cord of the baby could loop around the unborn child's neck. So that doesn't mean that pregnant people like shouldn't wear lei at all. There's you might have seen in the earlier pictures, Ray was talking about maile lei. So there are styles of leis that are like meant to be worn open so that they don't create a whole loop. So a lot of styles of lei have an open version too that work for that purpose and for others.
Yeah. So if you go to a party, so you can tell someone's pregnant because their lei is open. Okay, cool.
So and the question of like who can make and give lei, Kanaka Oiwi or Native Hawaiians and other Pacific Island Indigenous peoples have long gifted lei and other similar across different cultures things to non-Native people, but still it's important to remember that lei making and giving is something that comes from Native Hawaiians. And it comes particularly from a practice of giving and thanking and honoring, like we said in the beginning. And they've been widely appropriated by the tourist industry in Hawaii, and it's particularly sensitive because that industry is one that's taken up Hawaiian culture as a way of advertising an experience of exotic leisure. So kind of the idea that you go to something like a luau, which is also a cultural practice that has been misappropriated and kind of associated with partying, even though it has like the word luau refers to like a taro leaf, which is a food that's culturally important to Native Hawaiians. And the material impacts of this is that, I mean, tourists outnumber Native Hawaiians in Hawaii 50-1 on any given day. And it's super, super expensive to live in Hawaii because of how popular a practice of both short and long-term tourism is. And so the idea that I remember when I like first went to college on the continent and saw that like lei, those kind of plasticky, tacky rainbow lei were something that people associated with partying is something that really deeply bothered me. And I also noticed that another kind of sphere of appropriation and use of lei is that, and this isn't necessarily the same as the kind of rainbow lei partying thing. It doesn't have the same material negative effects as the kind of way that Hawaii has become synonymous with leisure, is that people have also kind of mistaken them to be an Asian American thing. And I think this is largely because a lot of Asian Americans live in Hawaii. And, you know, similarly, during things like graduation, well, maybe their kids go to college on the continent and they bring lei because it's something they've adopted from Native Hawaiians as people who've lived on Hawaii for such a long time. But then it becomes this thing of like Native Hawaiians completely get erased in a practice that is ours. So I just, wanted to talk about that a little bit. And I think we have some pictures. Yeah, so these are the kind of like plasticky ones that are part of this appropriation, like the ones that you usually see being associated with parties, even pride parades, I think kind of use these as a adornment, and they remind me also of this kind of hula girl Halloween costume that you also see around the sexualization of Hawaiian women, as well as a part of you know, how many movies use the joke of like, oh, so and so like got laid as a sexualized thing, is also an example of this. And this isn't to say that, like, obviously is Hawaiians teaching you all how to make a lei. We're saying that this is something that non-Hawaiians can't do or shouldn't do, rather that it's a practice of giving and thanking, and is historically and culturally connected to land. And we'll talk more about how the use of kind of materials like this that aren't natural are still hearkening to a connection to land. And the point is that when something is like mass produced in a factory, it's not like imbued with the same love and care that something, even if, you know, we didn't harvest tons of bird feathers for these, it's like, this is something that you put your time in, your love, and your like good vibes, and gift to someone that you care about. And I think that practice of care is really lost in the kind of mass production of something like this. So the line of like where something is honoring Indigenous practice, and the kind of philosophies behind that is one to think about when considering when something veers into the lane of appropriation.
Yeah, it reminds me of, you know, when we were growing up and learning how to make lei, one thing that our kumu, our teachers, would tell us would be to always think good thoughts and think good memories and good intentions while making your lei, because your mana or your power, your energy is imbued in the lei that you are making through your hands and through your practice. And so you wouldn't want to gift something to someone that was made without, you know, that kind of good and thankful energy. So yeah, it's more than giving the lei, it's giving a piece of you and a piece of your time. Okay, but yeah, so Ash had that question about the birds. We're going to talk about birds.
Can we do a commercial break?
We can do a commercial break. Okay,
commercial break. So the other, I figure since I'm at this point in my lei that other people might be getting here too, you can kind of like do this with your hand and feel it. If it feels like really tight in some parts and really loose in others, you can kind of gently pull parts of it down, so that they all feel still. Like, again, it should look something kind of like this. It feels like one entity, you know, like there aren't gaps in between. So you can definitely kind of shift the yarn around so that it looks the same width. If it's too tight, then it gets too thin at some points. So I don't know if you might have like noticed on this other camera. I know we've been screen sharing, so it's a lot to look at in addition to your own. But just kind of, I don't know, almost massaging it down a little bit so that, especially if it's getting really tight up by the front, where you're pushing it off, it's good to kind of push it down just a little bit so that you aren't pulling so hard that the yarn might break where it wasn't broken before.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
I think maybe my lei came untied at the bottom. Should I just like tie it like I would have done at the beginning?
Exactly. Yeah. So just wherever it untied, take the part where it's still, and then tie that back on to the ribbon.
Okay.
And yeah, when it's tied on, you can kind of push it back to where it was because it might have come loose a little bit here. You can just push the bundle of yarn back up this way.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the birds. So lei hulu, which I showed a picture of earlier, and I'll show you more pictures of in a sec, were birds made, lei made with bird feathers. So hulu means feather, but as always, a lot of our words, as I explained earlier with the meaning of lei, have kauna or a deeper meaning. And so hulu can also translate to meaning precious. And this is used often in the context of talking about our elderly, as old people being like feathered, or so because of that, like it's adopted the meaning of precious as well. All right, so two of the most famous birds most often used in feather work in Hawaii were the mamo, the honey creeper, and the iiwi, which is a scarlet honey creeper. And these were really, really prized by both makers of lei hulu and other types of featherwork. Sadly, the mamo, which is featured here in this picture, is believed to have gone extinct in 1899, around 1900. This is as a result mostly of deforestation, the introduction of mosquitoes. Fun fact, we did not have mosquitoes before contact. Neither did we have mongoose. So mongoose eating the eggs and then mosquitoes disseminating avian malaria is kind of what led to their extinction, but also European bird collectors kind of hunting and taxidermying them. However, the EEV are very happily still with us. I think I wrote it in the other slide, but they're not even on the endangered list, so we're really, really happy about that. And they remain a symbol of Hawaii's native forest. Other birds that were used were the o'o, which is also sadly extinct, the yellow o'u, which is still, I believe, classified as critically endangered, but it hasn't been seen in the wild in over 10 years. So it is possible that it is currently extinct. Also the amakihi and the apapane. So the picture on the left is a EEV. This is a living, breathing, flying EEV, whereas this mamo is taxidermied. And this is from the Bishop Museum archive. Yeah. So featherworking in Hawaii. So you're probably wondering, how did they get the feathers from the birds? Fun fact, we didn't kill the birds. I'll show you this in a slide after this, but to sustainably gather the feathers, Hawaiians would apply a sticky sap-like substance to tree branches where birds were known to roost. They'd wait for the birds to get stuck there and then ask the birds permission to pick a couple feathers and then clean up the birds' feet and release them so that they'd be able to go on and regrow the feathers. This was a really laborious and slow process, and therefore feathered garments were considered and other implements were considered very rare and used only for the elite or the chiefly class. So if you were someone that was in possession of a feathered item, you were considered really high class. So in addition to lei, feathers were used to make ahu'ula, which are capes, mahiole, which are helmets, and kahili, which are feathered standards, which I'll show you a picture of in a little bit. And yeah, this is kind of crazy. So mamo birds, as we saw in the previous picture, you can kind of see they only have a few yellow feathers. They're mostly black, so you're probably wondering why we use them for the yellow feathers. But because there's only there's 2 feathers under each wing that are yellow that can be used because they regrow faster. And because of this, yellow feathers are associated with the most high class people because getting these feathers are really, really rare. So Kamehameha I, probably our most prominent monarch, had an ahu'ula or a cape that was made entirely out of yellow mamo feathers. So it's estimated that over 80,000 mamo birds were used, not killed, but were asked to donate to the creation of this cape. So that estimated is about 320,000 feathers if we're multiplying that by 4 feathers per bird, and which is crazy because some people believe that Kamehameha was 8 feet tall. You're probably wondering as well, how the heck did they get all these feathers and like how long it would take? So because his birth had been prophesized for generations before he was actually born in like the 1850s, they estimate, people actually began to collect these feathers hundreds of years before Kamehameha was actually born. It is estimated that it would take about 10 generations of feather collectors to collect enough to make his cape. Okay, so here's a little comic I made that you can kind of see what the process of asking a bird for their feathers is like. So here's my ancestor who kind of looks like me. So they're saying, oh, I think I put the sap around here somewhere. And then, caw, it's the mamo. And then the mamo's in distress. And then, hey, mamo, may I please use some of your yellow feathers? And the mamo's kind of irritated, but they're like, oh, I haven't seen you in a little while. I guess it's about that time again, isn't it? Sure, okay, fine, but only 2 from under each wing and make it quick. Oh my God, thank you. I'm like, huh, so what are you making this for anyway? A cape? Who is this for? Ouch, plucking feathers. Like, yeah, it's a cape for this chief that's supposed to be born in like 100 years or something. Anyway, great, thank you. These feathers are beautiful. Well, only 319,996 more to go. Excuse me? And like, are you forgetting something? Like, sorry, I'll get you cleaned up and on your way right away. So probably exactly what happened back in the day. Okay, so here's an example of what an ahu'ula looks like. This is a shorter one that's kind of would go down to your chest area. It's almost like a shawl, I would say. But look at all those feathers. It's incredible. Yeah, and so these are kahili. So they're called standards. They're kind of, I don't know, what would you say there? What?
What?
Like what a
They're
kahili?
kind of what?
Like what? Okay, anyway, so you can either hold small ones or you would have like two attendants carrying, like flanking you with them. And this is just a general symbol of royalty. It's kind of like announcing your presence, and someone would literally follow you all day holding one of these. So this is the kahili room at Bishop Museum where I used to work. And so these are, some of them are real and some of them are replicas of the kahili. And then these are the portraits of each ali'i or chief. And you can see they're being flanked by their kahili. And this is a lei hulu, which is what we are kind of replicating making today. So this is the actual lei hulu of Chiefess Ka'ahumanu, who was one of the wives of Kamehameha. And this is made entirely out of mamo feathers, which is pretty nuts. Right, and here are some examples of what they would have looked like back then. These are beautiful paintings by Herb Kainui Kane. So you can kind of see, we also had helmets that are adorned with feathers. And then this is a painting of Ka'ahumanu. So you can see that in the painting that is this yellow leipo'o that she's wearing on her head. So that's supposed to be a replica of that. And she's wearing the leiniho paloa that I mentioned earlier, and she's holding a kahili. So this is a great example picture. All right, and this practice continued after post-contact. This is a portrait drawn of King Kamehameha III Kauikeauli wearing a ahu'ula feather cape. And then this is a picture taken of Princess Kaiulani in the 1890s before her death at age 23. And she's wearing a lei hulu. And this has been colorized for your viewing pleasure. Okay. So this is kind of a cool story from my time working at Bishop Museum, since we're hanging out with the museum people today. So this is the ahu'ula and mahiole of a chief named Kalani'opu'u. He was one of the uncles and mentors of Kamehameha. And this, yeah, so this is pretty incredible. So in 1779, Kalani'opu'u actually welcomed Captain Cook on the Kona side of the Big Island. And he actually gifted this to Captain Cook as a symbol of goodwill and to acknowledge him. Even though Captain Cook, even though we killed Captain Cook, he did die at that same visit. His men did still take this and they brought it back to Britain. It was bought at auction by a Lord St. Oswald, where it was sporadically shown for the next 100-something years. Being loaned to museums around Great Britain and things like that. But in 1912, it was donated to the, I'm gonna say this wrong, Papa Tongarea, which is the New Zealand National Museum in Aotearoa, or New Zealand, where it stayed for 100-something years. And negotiations were kind of going back and forth over that time. But it wasn't until 2016 when the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, the New Zealand government and the museum, their museum and Hawaiian Airlines kind of came to this resolution that they would loan the ahu'ula and mahiole to Bishop Museum in Honolulu for 10 years, although that 10 year is kind of an indefinite, will probably be like reinstated every 10 years. So anyway, so I was lucky enough to be a docent at Bishop Museum in 2016 on the day that the mahiole and ahu'ula were brought back. It was such a big deal that there was actually a live cam on the news where you could track it on the plane from New Zealand to Hawaii. And the whole time it was flanked by important dignitaries and community members. When it was brought back to the museum, there were thousands of people there. There were people crying, people chanting, people presenting the cape with gifts of song, gifts of food. It was pretty incredible. I was like really, really, really lucky to be there. So the cape is still there. You can see it at Bishop Museum in Honolulu if you ever get the chance. Very cool. Did you see this one?
Yeah, so red and yellow feathers, as you saw, are like mostly used in these feather work. Lei and capes, which is why we picked red and yellow, are red and orange, but I feel like this combination of 2 red and 1 orange kind of like mimics the bright red color of EEV feathers the best, based on like when I've made these before and kind of tried out different color combinations. The orange just like blends a little bit better with the red, which is why I picked this combination for us today. But you know, we thought through this as part of the Gather, Make, Sustain series, and sort of why is this process, which is using, you know, yarn and a plastic straw, the enemy of environmentalists, part of this series on Native art that is gathering and is sustaining. But I think it makes an important point that like, if we tried really, really hard, like, could we make featherwork still out of indigenous birds? Yes, but even, you know, because they're made of not just mamo most commonly, but historically we're also made of, like Ray was saying, Eevee and apapane, but it's the more sustainable thing at this point to do an alternative that continues kind of the spirit of our cultural practice, right? Doing something that is actually not negatively like contributing to the delicate indigenous ecosystem that we have. So people who want to more closely mimic the look of Lake Hulu still do this kind of work with dyed goose feathers, and obviously goose feathers don't come in a line like this. People have to very carefully like dye each one to these vibrant colors and kind of crimp them using spoons to like make a shape that they stack upon each other really carefully. So that's a super laborious process. And part of this is also like with colonization and everything, that this is something that's affordable to do, both in terms of the time that you spend doing it and also the costs of the materials. And so I don't know, just this practice of like sustainability that is adaptive to settler colonialism and is understanding that something is still an indigenous practice, even if it needs to adapt to these particular conditions, is one that we thought through a lot and is important to us. So yeah, that's the story with these lei. And part of the idea for this was also that last year, Brown, Nisi in particular, back when Neo was here, hosted a conference about Mauna Kea. And as part of thinking through what kind of gifts we could give people, we actually made these exact leis with this color combination. Some of the people here, Brody and Lei, each made these as well to give to our speakers, who were 2 Kanaka sort of land protectors that were really active in Mauna Kea, and 2 scholar activists who also, actually 3 scholar activists who were also really active in that fight. So this idea of gifting, even when we're not at home, being indigenous in diaspora, being indigenous and adapting to contemporary circumstances, is what we're thinking about. So yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, Makana was kind of talking about that earlier, but here's a visual example of what the difference between the goose feathers and our the feathers of our native birds look like. And so this was taken from I listened to a radio piece from a lei hulu maker. But yeah, so you can see just the size difference in the goose feathers, and you can kind of see they have a curve on it from that crimping process that Makana was talking about. But in the bag is actually this lei maker has preserved mamo feathers. The mamo, I will remind you, went extinct in 1900. And so these are believed to be mamo feathers, and you can just see how small and delicate they are in comparison to the goose feathers. But as we said, like, this is what we can do with what we have. And yeah, and so looking forward, yeah, although many of our native birds are gone forever, the important efforts, there are important efforts underway to protect what remains of our forest and its inhabitants, including bird sanctuaries. I remember when I was in elementary and middle school, the field trip we always went on would be to the volcano bird sanctuary, and we would watch them feed the baby crows, the right? Which is our native crow. And they would have these puppets, it's kind of tangential, but they would have these puppets that were like the mommy bird puppet, and that's how they would have to feed all the baby birds. You remember that? Yeah. And so that was like the field trip we used to go on back home to these bird sanctuaries and these protected forest areas. And so this is a quote that I took from the radio show from Kavika Lum, who was the feather worker whose things we saw in the previous slide. So he says our whole ahupua'a, which is like our land system, is based off of the mentality of knowing how everything interconnects. So for us to say that we're only going to do feather working would be hewa or wrong. For us to do without using the complete picture of trying to kokua or to help the entire environment. So in this, he's kind of saying that like, yes, it would, he was asked if possible, would you use native bird feathers? And his answer was only for the purpose of making things, no, but acknowledging the interconnectedness of our environments, it is a holistic environmental issue. Like we can't be doing this just for the birds. We have to help to revitalize and restore all aspects of our environment. Otherwise, everything will not be in balance, and we won't be able to go back sustainably to our practices. However, sadly, there is a new threat to our birds and lei-making practices, which has become kind of a big deal in the last few years, especially. It's called rapid ohia death. And so you can kind of see in this very dramatic and scary looking yellow poster from the state of Hawaii. So rapid ohia death is very quickly affecting our native forests. So ohia make up about 80% of our natural forest, and it's also where all of our bird friends live. And ohia are the lehua, which is the flower. The ohia is the tree, and the lehua is the flower. They fell in love, and now they hang out together. And so the lehua blossoms are used a lot in lei, while the nectar of the flower is also used to feed the iiwi, which, as we mentioned earlier, are currently still with us, but have become more threatened since their food source is now rapidly dying. And so I only say this because this is going to be possibly another place where we as practitioners and we as Native Hawaiians are going to possibly have to find new adaptive practices in order to keep up this type of, what can we use to keep up the use of lehua-ish items in our lei-making. There's currently kind of like an unspoken kapu, or like a restriction, a law against picking and using ohia. It's kind of just like a thing now. So as I mentioned earlier, in that hula festival, the Merry Monarch, in the last few years, you won't see any of the dancers using ohia or lehua because of this very issue that we're trying to protect and sustain what lehua we have left. So it will only we'll see in the next few years, one, if we'll be able to get this out of control, and two, what other adaptive practices can we use as other things, threaten our ecosystems and our environments back home. Oh, so that was okay. That was the last slide. Sorry, it was kind of left it on a somber note, but just going forward. What causes rapid ohia death? So I didn't look into it all the way, but it is a type of disease, like it's a disease that plants get. That's what I know. I don't know exactly scientifically what the plant disease is, but it spreads through the wood. So it's not illegal to pick lehua, the blossoms, but it is currently kind of illegal to cut the ohia wood and transport it from place to place. So you can't bring the wood from island to island. I know that's not allowed at all, which the poster was kind of talking about. So ohia are populous on the Big Island, all of the major islands, but particularly on the Big Island where Makana and I are from. And so because of that, yeah, it's actually a very recent thing, and I don't think people actually know where it came from or how it can be cured, sadly. So it's an ongoing issue.
Yeah, people try to be really careful about when they go between different forests that have ohia, and like cleaning off their shoes, I know is one thing, because it can like kind of stick to different material, which is why Ray was saying you can't like cut the wood and bring it to another place. So I think this is a particularly like, I don't know, for the tourism, for those kind of tourists that like to do the outdoorsy, the hiking kind of stuff, usually, you know, a big overlap with the kind of people that see themselves as environmentalists, that are kind of interested in that kind of thing, is, you know, just an example of how tourism and kind of the association of Hawaii with leisure is really connected to our indigenous practices and like trying to sustain them, that being like a really big challenge to it. Because people who come from outside don't, you know about things like rapid ohia death and yeah.
Yeah, so I think now when you, either when you land at the airport or even when you're on the plane flying into Hawaii, they will give you a piece of paper that talks all about rapid ohia death. Like, I feel like it either on the, okay, if you haven't flown into Hawaii before, they give you this agricultural declaration form that you have to fill out, whether you're from Hawaii or not, that says that you don't have any animals or plants with you, because it's illegal to bring certain plants and animals to Hawaii, and you have to declare this on a form. And I think, I feel like the last time I flew home, they had something on rapid ohia death as well. So it's something that they're trying to make visitors and people coming home more aware of. Sorry, that was kind of long and it was kind of a lot. So feel free to ask me any questions, ask us any questions.
Yeah, and we can just talk casually from here. Again, it's a long process, and this is something that people often do, I feel like, together in community because it's long and it's repetitive.
Yeah, it's a talk story type of event. Yeah, talk story. How are y'all doing, by the way? If anyone want to hold up what they're...
Yeah, this might be a good reminder to do the massaging of your lei in case any part is too tight.
Great. Stephanie's doing great. Okay, awesome.
Woo! The skeins aren't exactly going to be the same length. So when your first one runs out is when you're all done. For ours, the orange one is the shortest. You too? Mm-hmm. The orange one was shortest for someone else as well. Oh, yes,
oh, yeah. Okay, we're back.
I have a quick question. If you wanted, is there a standard length that, you know, you said when you run out, you're done, but if you're making one for a taller person or if you're making one little one, you know, how would you add in more yarn?
Yeah, if you wanted to make it extra long, or if you saw the picture on our introductory slide when Leah was introducing us, sometimes people do like a 2-strand situation where they like wrap the two together. You can like just do the same process of tying on another skein, and sometimes like you have left over because one was way longer than the other, so you can even tie on not a whole skein because that's going to make it doubly long, and it on a short person might touch the floor if you make it that big. But if you have kind of like extra bits and pieces, like if you make these a lot, it's good to kind of save them and then see like, oh, this one could be a little bit longer, and kind of tie them on. As long as you're good about making sure that you tie them as close as possible to the end, it's not too disruptive. Like you could see that my yarn had broken and you can't even see the part where it was tied anywhere. Oh, we have this one too.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one's a little bit better, but you can't even see where it was. So as long as you make the knot close to the end of the yarn, it shouldn't be a problem to extend it in any way.
Yeah, and if you're gonna make a shorter one, I don't know how you guys determine how long to make the ribbon, but I know a way to measure it if for a smaller person is to It should be like the length of your middle of your chest to your arm, I think is kind of the way that I've done it before. So like if you're doing it for a kiki or for a kid, you would kind of measure it based off of the length of their half of their wingspan. Yeah, great question.
Yeah. Or people like have a practice of putting lei on statues, like where you showed that picture of lei around the Kamehameha statue, but people will also put them like over the head of a person's statue. And those ones, since those statues can be kind of large, also tend to be long.
Yeah, I think my one, usually someone with a crane goes and puts all the lei on that statue. Another thing I didn't say in the PowerPoint is what do you do after with your lei, like if you have one. So for these, you can, if you're gifted one, like I, save them. It's always been like a memento of my graduation. I have boxes and boxes of leis at home. But if you're given a lei that is made out of natural natural things like leaves and flowers, and things that are going to wither in the next few days, something that I always do is if it's a lei that's made out of tea leaf that can be preserved. A lot of the times I'll put them around the portrait of a family member that's passed away. That's something that I've always done. So I have a sibling who had passed away, and so I always like get the lei that I'm given, and then I always put it on his portrait when I'm done with it. So his portrait back home has a bunch of dried tea leaf leis on it, and that's just my way of honoring and thanking him. And another thing too is I used to take them to the graveyard and put them on the headstones of family members or people that I'd like to honor. It's always just good though, especially with flower lei, to get them back to the land and to thank the land for letting you spend time with, with the lei and with what it has gifted to you. So it's always been a process of when you are gathering and you are collecting, whether it be leaves or flowers or other natural items, to always ask the plant, first, even if it's just as simple, like in my comic of asking the bird for the feathers, I always like, if I'm going to even get a tea leaf from the backyard, I'll be like, hi, Mr. Tea Leaf, or hi, Mrs. Tea Leaf, or hi, non-binary tea leaf plant. May I please borrow your leaves? It's always like, borrowing it. And then I hope they would say yes. I don't know what would happen if it said no, but then gathering it and then making something and always knowing that it will one day be returned to them. So that's an important part of this process as well.
Is anyone done? Nice.
Nice. Okay, someone's done.
Oh, someone's done. Okay. We can show you, and it's okay. We can like show it again. We have a friend who is still working on one, so maybe you would generously let us finish it for him to do a second demonstration for people who are done a little bit later. But to finish the lei, we're gonna take the ribbon out of the straw. So I'm just gonna use the scissors to kind of cut through the tape because I taped it on pretty tight, which is good because you don't want it to come loose. But then at this point, maybe I won't, there, it filled up fine. So yeah, just however you can take it out of the bubble straw. And again, our orange was way shorter, and then it's normal for them to vary a lot. This is how much leftover we had of one of the red strands. But just cut them all to about the same length when you have a little bit extra of one. This is how much extra of the shortest one we had. And this is about enough because you just need to tie another knot. But yeah, you cut them to about the same length. Careful not to cut the ribbon. And then you tie it in a knot around the ribbon. So I wonder if we could get a better angle on this. So yeah, go around the ribbon so that the knot is both closing these together again, but also fastening them to the end of the ribbon. And then you can do it twice just to make it more secure. I should say before you do that, kind of do a final massage where it's equally thick all the way through. I'm gonna do a second knot just to be sure. And then you can also cut off the extra here so that you don't have it dangling. Where'd you put this? Yeah, so just cut off the extra. Make sure before you do that though, so that it doesn't become hard to tie the knot, that your knot is secure here. So yeah, just you can cut off just enough so that it doesn't stick out of the rest of the lei. Make sure it's secure on both sides. So it should be about even on the two ends, and you just, yeah, tie the two ends together for closed lei. This one actually, if you had a little bit of extra when you tied the other side, you can snip that part off too now. Just do that. And yeah, you just tie it in a regular knot here. Rae showed kukui nut lei in the examples of lei part of the presentation, and some people will use those to secure the ends of these too. That's super common, but you definitely don't have to. So yeah, you could do a regular knot, you could do a bow, whatever you want. I guess a bow would be good if you want to be able to untie it. Some people also will kind of get another fancier ribbon to make a cute bow that is multicolored, but this is totally fine for our purposes. Oh, I did the bow wrong. Let me do it again. But yeah, this isn't a particularly important part.
Yeah, you can secure it any way you want.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought of more lei facts. So contemporary lei fact is if you go to craft stores in Hawaii, like I said, around graduation season, so the month of May, they have all these charts that show all of the colors of all of the different high schools in your area. So if you're making a lei for a graduate, sometimes they'll even have them in packs, so you can buy the pack for that high school. So you make it with the class colors or the school colors. That's super, super common. And another lei fact is a lot of the times when you're giving lei in ceremony, especially with a group of people, there are certain chants that go along with presenting the lei. And okay, look at that lei, it's beautiful. So I don't know if other Kanaka in the room remember the Kele Maila chant, which I'm not going to do. I'm so sorry, I do remember it. I just remember, and I don't know if you guys had the same experience of when a group of people would come to visit us at school, and the chant is not that long, but you need to chant it over and over and over again until everyone gets their lei and everyone gets back in line. So you could be saying this chant for like 20 minutes, like depending on how many people were there, which is why I never forgot it, because I must have said it 100,000 times. But yeah, that was more random lei facts.
Yeah, do people have questions, or you can even just unmute and we can, I don't know, talk, casually. Like we said, this is a long process. If you have to go in the middle of making one, I think using like a clothespin to kind of fasten it where you are is totally fine too, and just continue on later.
That's
Makana,
been
and
wonderful. Oh, go ahead, Allie.
I have a question. What instrument is behind you? Whose instrument is that?
That's my tenor ukulele.
Fun.
On brand.
It's black because I only play emo music and pop punk music on it. It was my quarantine pass the time present to myself. I kind of grew up playing not super well, but it's something that my papa, my grandpa is really good at. And so I'm excited to finally go home this summer and learn more from him.
My partner was gifted leis when he traveled to Hawaii from Kanaka people, and I was curious about wearing them beyond your the initial when you're given them initially, and are leis commonly worn, or do you save them for ceremonies, or do you save them for future use? Maybe the ones made out of more modern materials.
I'm thinking of Ray's story about the grandma getting a bunch of yarn ones at bingo and then her having sent them to Ray around the time of graduation. I think for these kinds, it's semi-common to regift them if like there's another time when that seems appropriate. Maybe if I don't know if you or your partner like have Native Hawaiian friends in particular that would like understand, the meaning of it and all of that. I think sometimes people kind of wear them for like Hawaiian events. So like
Yeah.
Ray talked about the
Merry
Merry Monarch. That's one where people will wear lei hulu or kind of mock lei hulu. Like these are the goose feather ones. There's like it's almost like, okay, the competition itself is a hula competition,
But there's another
also
competition.
a side competition of which Auntie has like the most like flamboyant like hat lei on. Like so people put like rimmed hats on and then put like a lei like this one on top of it.
And sometimes it's half the forest on the hat,
Yeah.
full bouquet, full everything, or like, so it's very much a pageant. And these are just the old ladies that sit in the audience. But another thing too is, so my papa, who I keep talking about tonight, because he's Hawaiian and stuff, but he can never get tickets to Merry Monarch because they literally sell out in hours. And so he only a couple times if he's been lucky enough to get tickets, but he has a very nice kukui nut lei, and kukui are a traditional type of lei that are long lasting because they're the shell of the nut. And so he'll wear his red aloha shirt and he'll put on his nice kukui nut lei, and he will watch the Merry Monarch on TV for 4 nights in the same outfit because that is important. It's important to him. So it's not like you can't wear your own lei, even though it is something that is traditionally gifted. But for him, it's an important part of his ensemble.
Yeah. So
But-
the short answer is yes,
Yes.
but the line of like when it makes sense to.
If you are wearing a lei, people will ask you why you have the lei on, especially back home or in Hawaii. So just know that if you're not being like, especially if you're wearing a nice lei that's not like a touristy kind of lei, people are going to be like, oh, congratulations, what happened? Or at work, because I used to be a barista, we would always get leis from our customers on our last day of work. And without fail, people would be like, oh, happy birthday. And I'll be like, why would I be working on my birthday? But it's just it's a signifier of either a congratulation or an accomplishment or something. And so out of that context, it would be kind of weird. But you wear a lei to a nice party.
Yeah, or something. Yeah, something culturally significant. Either, yeah, people ask like, oh, congratulations, happy birthday, or like, oh, where are you going? Like something fancy, depending on what kind of lei, I think. Yeah.
How are people doing? I want to see what,
Yes.
Ashlyn has a
the
question.
progress.
Yeah, I have a question regarding like for like I guess the older leis that like use more of the traditional methods or like supplies, are those like, do you ever see anyone wearing that like during ceremony, or it's still like the contemporary style that is used during those times? More like I guess cultural ceremonies.
Mhm. Yeah, well, the tea leaf ones, the lei-making, like those are really, the green leaf ones are also like old school, like
And the
there's
maile,
something,
yeah.
and maile, yeah, like green leaf ones are things that people made back in the day and also make now and actively use. The feather ones, I think those ones are mostly just in museum and trying to be like very well preserved since they're so delicate. So yeah, people use the leaf ones and ones made of natural but abundant materials. Yeah. Also,
All right,
yay.
let's see.
Someone's is all done. Woohoo.
Hey, Kaylee's and
Leigh and
Brody's,
Brody.
Allie and
Allie.
Sydney's. Beautiful guys.
How do we tie it off again?
Just so you tie the, oh, Patrick's is done. We can show it again.
Oh, perfect timing. Our podmates is just at that moment.
What's that? That's okay. That's
Patrick,
okay.
you can talk. People know you're here.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do this
bring
again.
it.
Good job, Patrick. Perfect timing.
We are, yeah, I can show it like this.
Allie, say hi.
Okay, so, oh look, even for yours, the orange was the shortest one. I wonder why.
Skimping out on the orange, man.
Yeah. So here it is. You remove the tape from the boba straw. Oh, I guess we could. Felicia, are you at the point where you have to take the straw off, or you just have to tie it?
I just have to tie it.
Oh, okay. So we don't have to show that part. I mean, we could, but because the end came a little bit loose, so we can also show, because it's the same on both ends, how you would do it from this end to here. So I'm just gonna untie it because the other end.
Just in case this happens to you in the future. It's good to know.
It's very common and likely. Yeah. So you take the 3 strands again and tie them to the ribbon. So together, wrap them around and then tie a knot. And then you might double knot it just to make sure it stays nice and tight. I missed the ribbon. So yeah, you just tie the yarn to the ribbon, and then you tie the 2 ends of the ribbon either together or in a bow.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Can give this back. It looks like you can go a little bit longer with this one, like until you have maybe this much left. I think it's still loose enough to tie. Oh,
Put her lay back, yeah. There we go.
Yeah, they're very soft.
It's really nice. It's like a fluffy caterpillar. Which I don't think I've ever seen a fluffy caterpillar. They exist in myth and legend.
Not in person.
Yeah, no, not in real life.
You've never seen them before?
They exist here.
They do
They're
exist.
brown though.
I'll send you a photo sometime of one. It's like a whole little train of them. And yeah, it was crazy. It was like, I don't know, it was like over 50 of them all together, just butt to butt.
That's funny. Little woolly bears. They're brown.
Yes.
There's like this legends. I don't really know. It's like New England lore, I guess, that if it has a thick, because they're brown and black, if they have a thick black band, it's going to be a harsh winter. But I don't know if that holds true.
If it holds up.
Right, Makana, do you have any resources too, or any links that we can share with folks for them to learn about more about leis and Hawaiian history?
Yeah, I may have closed all my tabs, but I will find them really quick. Oh, here's the radio article that I was referencing earlier. This one is specifically about lei hulu and feather work. This is from the Hawaii Public Radio, which is really great. It's from a few years ago, but I thought this one was really useful. And
That Bishop Museum page is pretty good.
yeah, the Bishop Museum, please. Yeah, ask me about working at Bishop Museum. That was an interesting time in my life. It's the museum with the really big sperm whale in it. I've seen it before, but it's a really, really great museum. If you do have a chance, you must go if you're in Honolulu. They also have preserved all of the taxidermied birds and ones that are no longer with us. And one of the exhibits that I helped to tour when I was working there was about Hawaiian forest birds, and then in like the in memoriam section, which I know is kind of morbid, but then it had this like tower, it almost looked like a coat rack, and it had the gloves, like hands with gloves, and in each tiny hand was like the tiny taxidermy bird. It was really sad. I did cry doing this presentation when I was making it because I was thinking about how the mama was gone. I never knew them, but sad.
Yeah, they're your relative, and you feel for them.
Yeah. We have all kinds of cool Hawaiian birds though. My amakua, or my how are we describing amakua nowadays? In a good way.
Guardian animal.
Yeah, like a family guardian animal. Mine is the i'o, which is the Hawaiian hawk. We have a native hawk, which is pretty cool. They're not endangered. They're doing pretty well. But they're really rare. I feel like we hardly see them. We also have native Hawaiian owls. We also have native Hawaiian bats.
That was so much easier than what I thought it would be.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. There's like a big range of how easy to how difficult lei can be, which is kind of why I really like them. They're very like, I don't know, versatile. And I really like it as like a Indigenous practice of gifting. Like, yeah, I like, to make sure that you're in a good place when you make something like this, and then kind of gift that time to somebody. It's really, I don't know, feels really special.
I have a question. I don't know how long I've been doing it for, but I only have 2 strings left and I can't unravel it to go find the other one. And so I don't know if it's just going to unravel on its own, or should I try to, or should I just tie it off?
Yeah, it might be. I'm trying to think of what is the best way forward from here. Maybe just tie it up. I mean, they might be like tucked in pretty well as you like wrapped them around. So there's a chance that it won't unravel. And what you could do maybe is tie off the 2 strands that you have now. And if it does unravel, try to tie them right, because these are just, it looks like it's one thing, but really it's like wrapped around a bunch of times. If you find that it does unravel, even if it's like here, tie it in a knot and then keep pulling it and kind of like combing out the strands so that like you tie it, but you can't just like see where it is, if that makes sense. Like play with it a little, like separate them so that like you're tightening it as you're pulling out the strand so that you can't see that it's been tied there, if that makes sense.
Great job, everyone. They look lovely.
Aw.
You should all be proud of yourselves.
Yay.
First time, not first time for everybody. I know Brody and Lei have made this exact one before, but yeah, great job, everyone. This is fun.
Oh, we have a couple folks wearing them. They look great.
And then when you give lei, I'm not gonna do it now, but like sometimes when people give you a lei, you have to hug them, and cause sometimes it freaks me out, but because I'm not a hugging person. But if an older person, like an auntie or something, but it gives you a lei, just know that the lei is also a hug and a cheek kiss. Just be prepared. It may happen to you.
Great job, everyone. I want to say Katapa Tanamu, thank you all, but huge Katapa Tanamu to you, Lei, and to you, Rae and Makana, for making lei with us.
Thank you so much, Leah, for giving us the time and space to do this. This was like really fun and a nice pause in the kind of chaos of the end of the semester, and just really great to be able to share one of our native practices with so many people. So thank you again. This was really great.
Mahalo.